Hey everyone, and welcome to the Billion Dollar Banker podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Perrone, and today I'm beyond excited to have John Campetella, Director of Integrated Wellness, here with us today. John is one of the original UFC fighters, but not only that, he brings 30 years of educational and athletic experience on everything comprehensive wellness. In addition to that, he lectures at plenty of universities here locally in New Jersey on things like human biology, microbiology, nutrition, and physiology. And I couldn't think of someone to start off the new year any better to bring to this episode than John. John, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me, Nicole. Very exciting. Great time of year to get into this. Great topic. Everybody's following through their New Year's resolutions. A lot of misinformation out there. People don't know which direction to go in. So hopefully we could provide a little bit of advice and direction towards reaching their goals.
Absolutely. You're 100% right. And John, I've been following you for some time. There's plenty of people here locally that absolutely swear by the nutrition and the values that you bring to this world. And there's so much that we need to know. And I want to start by talking to you when you think about our listeners today, right? What are some of the key components that they need to think about when it comes to their wellness in the new year?
I think sifting through the misinformation, there's a lot of self-proclaimed experts that guiding them in the wrong direction. And we see now that people are advocating themselves, even with the medicine. They're really disenfranchised with the traditional medical model,
Hmm.
where they prescribe to treat, mask the symptoms as opposed to addressing the root cause. And that starts with changing lifestyle. And we've lost that. It's really see the doctor, here, write a script. We're gonna give you the script. And then basically they're gonna put you on medication. And then you might have a medication that's say for toxic to your liver. So then you need a medication for that. And by the time we're done, we're on all these medications. My dad, when he passed, was on 20 different medications, heart
Mm.
medications, blood sugar medications.
Wow.
This affected his liver, so you medicine for that. This one affected his kidneys, medicine for that. First thing my mother did when he passed was throw out the meds. She couldn't look at them anymore.
Oh
20
my
some odd
goodness.
pills a day. People have to realize that that's not the answer. You're not you're not treating the root of the disease. We need to make lifestyle changes
Hmm.
and get away from that medical model.
And you're absolutely right, because I think a lot of us have taken notice to that in recent years, where you get your blood work done, nobody calls you, you're going for a physical, they're still
Yes.
banging on your elbow and your knee to see if it moves. I mean, it seems so antiquated when you think about just the standard physical today. So what do you recommend to our listeners as we're thinking about getting healthy in the new year? What do you recommend? How do we get started with getting our health on the right track and making sure we're in balance?
Very important. What's wild is that what we've known in health and fitness, medicine is just catching up to now. That building muscle are the organs of longevity and weight loss and metabolic health.
Hmm.
So things we've been doing in health and fitness forever. The focus on protein as a nutrient. We've always been carbohydrate heavy. And as a result, majority of our diets are carbohydrates. And really we need protein. They used to follow antiquated studies that high protein was dangerous to the kidneys. They were flawed studies. So now they're realizing we have to increase our protein intake. That builds muscle. It curbs appetite.
Hmm.
Then the differentiation between do I eat carbs or not? The brain and red blood cells require glucose. So they can't function on ketones. So there's a whole misinformation. There's a fad diet. There's supplements that they say there's no one size fits all or a cure all.
Hmm.
It's a holistic approach. You have to do your training, your diet. You have to take proper supplements. And there's only a few that are really effective. The supplement industry is a whole other animal. It's not regulated. People are spending billions on anything basically it's going to give you colorful urine. That's about all it does, majority of the stuff.
Yeah, and it does, most of it
Waste of
doesn't
time.
taste good either, and it's so hard as, like,
No.
your standard, like, just look, everyone's so busy with their lives and with work, and it's hard. You really need to focus on this. It's almost could be a full-time job to try to figure out how to take care of your health, and one of the things we wanna do for our listeners is help them reach their full potential, and so, thinking about some of the things that are going on right now today, and then I wanna get back to what you do and what you recommend for your patients to get started, but let's talk about RFK and the FDA. What do you think from that perspective? How do you think that's going to change our Food and Drug Administration? Is it going to be for the better?
Absolutely. I do question some of his policies, but I will say, what we're seeing now is what a lot of people have realized for a long time. The FDA, for example, is trying to ban the use of peptides. They were peptides that have been used for decades. We've been using them in the gray area for quite some time. And now medicine is just catching up. So they tried to ban, for example, one compound called BPC 157. I used it myself on a rotator cuff tear. We didn't go for surgery. They
Mm,
Compounding pharmacy sued the FDA. They were unable to prove that they were dangerous. And now RFK is actually stopping the fight against this. I'm
mm,
not a conspiracy theorist,
mm-hmm,
but we see retraction of studies on hormone optimization, testosterone, estrogen. 20 years it took for us to realize that we actually need testosterone as we get older or estrogen. It's
mm-hmm.
kind of wild like that. And then, you got to understand like high fructose corn syrup. The corn industry has a very powerful lobby.
Right.
High fructose corn syrup is causing body-wide inflammation. It's a high glycemic carb. So we have record levels of type 2 diabetes, which leads to inflammation in the body, increased risk of cancer with the metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease. Why is it taking us so long to find this out and correct it? Well, they just banned the dye, the
Mm-hmm.
red dye. Now
Red
all of a
40.
sudden they realize it causes cancer. So I think this is going to be in the positive,
Mm,
definitely positive. And I can't even blame the doctors. They're so pushed to, they get lower reimbursements. They don't have much time to see a patient.
mm-hmm.
They write them a script, send them out the door. They don't even get to follow up properly.
Right.
So we need to get the medical industry, more towards this, spending more time with the patients, pushing the, health and wellness as opposed to just a prescription. It's
Absolutely.
very important.
Yeah, I mean, you think about you start to see all these examples of things that we've gone through historically where, something's pushed and it's okay, it's fine, but then all of a sudden it's not healthy, right? We just saw that with the COVID-19 vaccinations and so much changing. We saw one of Trump's executive orders, I believe, today is back pay for any military members that were, released from duty because they wouldn't vaccinate. Any thoughts on vaccinations?
This I will say, a lot of my nursing students ask me, how do I address this? And basically, I look to the class. Now, vaccinations, there's a lot of against the childhood diseases. I turned to the class and I said, if it wasn't for vaccinations, a large part of this class wouldn't be here. There are some scary childhood diseases, diphtheria,
Mm-hmm.
things like that we require vaccinations from. The COVID vaccine was very different, though, than traditional vaccine. It wasn't a weakened or dead or attenuated virus. It was a modified mRNA, which actually modifies and causes our body to produce the viral spikes. What's confusing is we see things like side effects like myocarditis, inflammation of the muscle of the heart.
Mm-hmm.
Was it caused by the vaccine
Mm,
or the virus? So there's a lot that we don't know about. And, I think that this whole thing with Fauci and all them caused a
mm-hmm.
lot of distrust with the government and then the medicine. There's a lot. I have a co-teacher that she has an autoimmune disease.
Mm.
She had to quit her job as a teacher. She couldn't take the vaccine and she was forced
Oh,
to, leave the Board of Ed. And, now she's finally coming back. There was a firefighter also was against taking the vaccine. That was ridiculous. My biggest issue is I didn't have a choice. My wife is a nurse, didn't have a choice,
mm-hmm.
and they took that away. As far as vaccines go, like flu vaccines, my thing is the best defense is a healthy immune system. So I don't
Amen.
get them.
And I think, to your point before, it's not about really being a conspiracy theorist. It's about being a critical thinker. It's about
Yes.
maybe not just believing something that comes out because maybe it's the popular belief. As we see, we've all been drinking soda for, hundreds of years, right? And you see it like in Mexico, they don't have the high fructose corn syrup in their Coca-Cola. Here we do. You could see the differences in the food that we eat here and the ingredients that are in our foods versus other countries. And when you think about our health, and I think about our listeners today, I'm sitting here thinking, what do we do, right? Like if I can't go to my regular physician to make sure everything's in check, how do I get started? And what are some of the things that you recommend we start getting tested for and we prioritize?
First, on your point, corporate profit has taken precedence over our health. That's a major problem, all
Mm,
right, as you see. These lobbies have said that this high fructose corn syrup and these other things are okay. And now we're finding out the long term effects, all right? Obesity has reached a rate of 67% of the adult population is growing.
wow.
By 2035, they believe the majority of our population will be overweight if we don't do anything. Now, what I would recommend as we get older, comprehensive blood work,
Hmm.
very important. You'll see that the cursory blood work that they do with most general practitioners is not enough. It's not comprehensive enough to give you a few picture of our health.
Mm.
Even endocrinologists leave out a lot of crucial tests that can identify thyroid disorders, Hashimoto disease. If they're just really not comprehensive enough. Now we have busy lives, so it makes it very difficult to schedule blood work. So what we did was we actually offer telemedicine visits. I just introduced my at-home blood test kit to make it even more conducive.
Right.
It's difficult. My wife's a nurse. Took over a month to schedule blood work to get her blood work done. So we make it available and use the telemedicine model to make it, people allow people more accessible to take control of their health, and they need to. Blood test once every year is just not good enough.
It's not
Definitely
gonna
not
cut
good.
it. It's not gonna cut
No.
it. And is there anything specific that you're testing for when you do your blood work at home testing kits that you think is something that's really crucial that's left out? Is there anything in particular? I mean, I know you just mentioned some of the specialties really not testing for certain things, but if someone were to come to you, what would they expect to see, or what should our listeners expect to get out of that blood result that they're not getting at their physician today?
Let me give you an example with an endocrinologist. Now, with a simple thyroid panel. Now, as we know, the thyroid gland produces thyroxine, which regulates our metabolism, but very crucial our early development.
Mm-hmm.
They test for only TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, and T4. T4 is the inactive form of that hormone.
Mm-hmm.
And now they'll medicate if they have low, levels of T4. They'll give them a certain protocol. But what you don't see is that you have to test for the T3, which is the active form, as well as reverse T3,
Mm-hmm.
and then the antibody for the thyroid, because you see Hashimoto, which is an autoimmune disease. So they're leaving this all out. You'll have patients coming to us, and they said, my endocrinologist has me on this medication, and I'm not seeing any amelioration of the symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
So then when we do a full panel, we see that they're not converting the T4 to T3. They actually, a lot of people we see are coming up with the thyroid antibody, and they are actually have Hashimoto. I had a patient who was seeing an endocrinologist, showed us the panels of the endocrinologist. Like, wow, who did this? They caught the
Mm-hmm.
Hashimoto. I never would have. An endocrinologist. They're not thinking outside the box.
Right.
It's a very basic test, and they're only giving a small part of the panel that you really require.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a
Yes,
big
that's
issue.
I mean, that's huge. Yeah, absolutely. And then you think about like our day-to-day our performance, right? Our just how we feel, our energy levels, all of these things are really critical to just the success that we have in our lives and our day-to-day and how we kind of get through the year, the week. And so I really feel like this is such an important topic. And there's so many things out there right now. So we're going to talk about, because we were talking about some of the controversial posts that you have up recently, kind of calling out some practices that just aren't great. I saw one about the new documentary that just came out with Brian Johnson, Don't Die. I wanted to get your opinion on that in particular. That's, he's kind of been mainstream on reversing aging. I know that you have some opinion on that. What do you think about that documentary and his practices?
Well, I have more than an opinion. His consultant actually reached out to me at one time about a year and a half ago. And she was going over his protocols, asked my opinion, and we did a lab review with her. And she basically said that my lab review, and I worked with my providers on, we have a specialized lab review template, and our protocols were light years ahead of his scientists. And I pointed out the holes. I discredited him with his rampamycin use a year and a half ago. And now it
Mm-hmm.
just came out that he stopped using it because he says it feels like it's aging him. And I said, well, that's an immune suppressant. I'm not confident on the literature. Sure enough, what just came out last week that he's
Mm-hmm.
getting off the rampamycin for obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he's another one turning it into a business. He's using stem cells and things like that to supplement what he's doing.
Right.
The average person can't afford that. And not only that, he was famous for his blood transfusions, right, from
Mm-hmm.
his son. That himself, I think his scientists or doctors were getting over on him because they saw somebody with unlimited funds. That
Mm-hmm.
with the blood transfusions, that was very outdated. It wasn't the blood itself; it was certain metabolites and chemicals within the blood that
Mm-hmm.
were actually providing the effect in the studies that they did with mice to show the older mice becoming younger metabolism and so forth. So they're basically scamming them. But her words were, "You run circles around their scientists." And I said, "Well, the
Wow.
problem is, yeah, so I have in fact, I was advising the enhanced games. They're the ones that are coming out against the Olympics
Mm-hmm.
that they want to have athletes control what they're doing." And I was advising them on protocols as well as safety things that we should be looking at.
Wow.
So you're speaking to the right person
Oh
with
yeah.
this.
Amen.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
what I think about anti-aging, that's such a hot topic right now, right? So if it's not, you're not buying Brian Johnson's total vitamin package, or you're not buying into kind of the hype there. What can people do today? I know listeners want to know how can we reverse aging? Are there products that we could take? Is there something we can do in that space?
Well, let me give you an example. Here's the thing. All that stuff, most of it, the stuff they're selling, total garbage. Total, it's worthless. The whole thing with the genetic testing,
Hmm.
it's also garbage. Gene expression is affected by the environment, and factors we can't control. So they're selling you, for example, like Gary Brecker's MTHFR genetic test, $600 for a test that you could have just done a blood test that's included in your insurance and determine if you process B folate vitamins. So it's becoming a scam. Everybody's in search of that, longevity. We've been looking at the fountain of youth for decades,
Hmm.
since early man, right? Everybody's wanted to live forever.
Right.
So they're using that. As far as it goes, again, they're finding out now that building muscle is not only the organ of weight loss, but longevity.
Wow.
So it improves metabolism. It took medicine 30, 40 years to catch up to this.
Hmm.
So proper diet and nutrition. There are supplements that you should be taking. For example, vitamin D, which acts much like a hormone, along with vitamin K and magnesium that absorb together. As far as the hormones, as we know, hormones decline as we age. Hormone optimization. They used to vilify that. The bodybuilders gave it a bad stereotype about, the testosterone therapy. They actually saw it in Italy. They did a study that those who had low testosterone were more prone to hospitalization from COVID than those that did.
Wow.
Now, same thing with this: low testosterone, depression, anxiety, you have cardiovascular disease, diabetes from low testosterone. So now we're realizing that they retracted all negative studies about them being cardiovascular risk, even prostate cancer. Same thing for women. Estrogen therapy was frowned upon. Now it's okay 20 years later.
Yeah.
So hormone optimization is one step. You and I were just discussing, your dad was talking about NAD.
Yes.
NAD is a coenzyme that's very important in the Krebs cycle, which powers the mitochondria. The mitochondria, if you remember from high school, the powerhouses of the cell.
Hmm.
As those decline, mitochondrial dysfunction occurs. When you supplement with mitochondria, the NAD, which improves the stability, improves the output of the mitochondria, preserves muscle and nerve stem cells. So it prevents sarcopenia, which is muscle atrophy as we age,
Wow.
the nerve stem cells, which prevents cognitive dysfunction like Alzheimer's and dementia. It even stabilizes our DNA to prevent cancer because the instability of the DNA can give rise now to cancer. So NAD is one,
Incredible.
and then don't fall for Sinclair with his NMN and all these precursors. The orals are not absorbed as well. It's total junk. They're
Okay.
not going to do anything. So I advocate IV, or we use subcutaneous because it's more accessible to do two to three times a week. And the energy, Nicole, I can't even describe it. Everybody who's done our sub-Q NAD,
Hmm.
they're like, wow, I can't believe this.
And you're saying
And that's just the beginning.
that's several times a week? That's is
Twice a
it
week.
different? Okay, so twice a week, and is it injection based, the NAD?
Yeah, subcutaneous. You could
Okay.
do IV also. In fact, the best thing to do is an IV every like 10 to 14 days if you can, but it's not conducive to be able to go for them regularly. They take about 3 hours. So the next
Okay.
best thing is the subcutaneous. It's under the
Okay.
skin with an insulin pen. The whole thing, like with the precursors, David Sinclair, Harvard geneticist, made millions selling his NMM. And I debunked him, and right away they look at me, oh, ex-ultimate fighter, muscular guy. What does he know what he's talking about? Here's a Harvard geneticist. David should stick to genetics. He did his test with a very primitive worm called a flatworm, a nematode. That doesn't translate to human studies, and people bought into it. No effect, no effect. When you
See, that's
take the
the hard thing.
subcutaneous NAD,
Hmm.
the next day, like, whoa,
You can feel it.
literally like, wow, yeah,
Wow. And so now is
absolutely.
this affordable for our listeners, like when they're thinking about, wow,
Oh,
okay,
yes,
NAD. This is something that is a I mean, look, it takes 3 hours to get your eyelashes done almost, I think. So three
right.
hours to sit and maybe reverse aging a little bit and get your energy levels up. I mean, to me, that sounds worth it. But you also
Oh,
said you could do
absolutely.
it just as an injection. Would this come to your home? Is this expensive? Tell us more.
It's very, very, very affordable, and
Okay.
we send right to the house. And we were talking about the videos about these places. They're charging people ridiculous amounts of money, and they're getting their medication from questionable sources. I've heard a lot of stories, and I've seen people show me medications that receiving with no list of the pharmacy. that they're coming from. They're in insulin syringes that are pre-filled. Number one, the potential for contamination is ridiculous. I've had patients transitioning from other clinics and they're experiencing body-wide inflammation. And I said, well, where is this from? They couldn't tell me the pharmacy. They couldn't tell me if it was an actual provider with an NP, a PA, or a doctor. And in New Jersey, you require a collaborating physician with an NP or a PA. I think they were just regular RNs. So they're not qualified to even prescribe. So they were getting around it, I guess, going to research sites, getting the stuff in bulk, and then giving them out syringes. And a lot of the stuff has to be refrigerated,
Oh my
and
goodness.
it's not viable. They're really, that's why you have to be really careful when you're navigating this whole world. There's so
Hmm.
many charlatans and scam artists and the Dave Aspreys, the Gary Breckers. I watch his videos and I debunk them all day. Then you have these clinics overcharging people, getting meds from questionable sources.
Hmm.
It's a minefield out there.
It makes me think about. I just saw a recent quote, and it was like we have an overload of information and like a lack of wisdom, right? It's
Yes.
there's so much coming at us, and there's so many places to get information. You really have to be mindful of where it's coming from, and that's why I love having experts like yourself on. And one of the things I'm
Thank you.
thinking of is when you think about we're reversing aging. How about you talked about the obesity epidemic, right? And now we have Ozempic, one of the most popular drugs out there to lose weight. What do you think about Ozempic? What would you say about something like that?
As somebody who is a lifelong athlete and take care of myself, I have a hard time. But I'm saying, well, a lot of people will say, well, why can't they just diet and exercise? I've come to the realization it's not that easy for most people. I'm very regimented in my diet. I keep my diet most of the time. I stay at single digit body fat. I train today. I have off. I'm going twice a day, and I try to get 2 workouts. That's not for everybody.
Hmm.
So, there's a lot of side effects, but you have to look at the good versus the bad. Does the outcomes and are they worth the side effects? We watch patients, not only drop weight, their metabolic markers improve across the board. Then the psychological value itself, that I've seen. I've had patients, they've lost 30, 40 pounds. Their whole outlook on life has changed. The women itself. I've had a female friend, she lost 40 pounds. Now every outfit fits. She used to be a bit of a recluse. Now she's out. She's going out, having a great time.
Oh, that's
The
great.
metabolic health has improved across the board. Some people just lack that discipline,
Hmm.
and it's not everybody can do that. Like you
Hmm.
go to the gym, but not something we take for granted, but it's not that easy.
Right.
It's not that easy. People have different relationships with food. They need that help.
Yeah,
So
it's
it's a
certainly
hard,
it's
yeah,
simple. It sounds simple, but it's not easy, right? Like getting up and going to the gym every day that sounds simple, right? Work out an hour a
for
day,
us.
eat it sounds simple,
Yes.
but it's not easy. It's really hard. And some days you don't feel like it. And I could imagine sometimes, that hormone imbalance can play a role. And that's why I think prioritizing, like you said before, balancing your hormones, making sure everything is where it needs to be, and then, making sure there's nothing else outside of your control getting in the way.
That's what we do. See, now I see a lot of providers, they're just prescribing these meds and they're not doing basic blood work. They
Hmm.
should be looking for hormonal imbalances. We see rampant amounts of PCOS, all these different things that are going to sabotage it. Hypothyroidism subclinical, and the reference range in traditional medicine is very broad.
Hmm.
Even testosterone can run from 300 to 900. And even though somebody's exhibiting symptoms in their bottom end of the range, the doctors won't treat. That's
Hmm.
not acceptable. That's such a broad range. You want to
Right.
be at ideal levels, and then the same thing with the women, they're avoiding prescribing based
Hmm.
upon a reference range that's so broad, it's ridiculous. Think about when you were in school, if you're on the bell curve, you have the bottom end and then you have the top. Why would you want to be on the bottom end of the bell curve
Hmm.
when it
Right.
comes to your health?
Right. So your doctor may say, "Oh, well, the bottom's a 2 and the top's a 6. You're at a 2.5, so you're fine, right?" And you're like, "I want to be a
Right.
6. I don't
And
want
the
to be at the
patient's
bottom."
like, but I feel like garbage. I can't wake up. I
Hmm.
can't lose weight. They
Right.
still won't treat.
Well, it's a great point because there could be other things kind of interfering with our ability to stay disciplined. And I want to talk about you have a bodybuilding background. Obviously, you're still in amazing physical shape. You're one of the original UFC fighters. Tell us about your background just in physical health and bodybuilding, and what you'd recommend for our listeners in that space.
I have been an athlete all my life. My parents got me involved in swimming when I was 7 years old. So, and I took to it. And I first started looking into bodybuilding when I was reading comic books, and I wanted to look like one of the superheroes. And at one time, it was pretty funny. I read that Wolverine could press 500 pounds over his head. So I trained until I could do it for a triple. So I have a different kind
Wow.
of motivation. Yeah. So I've been lifting over 40 years. I'm very regimented with my diet, my training. I'm not actually a bodybuilder. I just jump in shows randomly just to show that condition I stay in year round. Where most bodybuilders have to diet for 20 weeks, I could jump in a show in a week or two because I stay
Wow.
that low in body fat. Yeah. So I'm an extreme though. I'm the freak that wakes up at 2 o'clock in the morning, have my pre-workout meal in the gym by 4, and then I'll work into the middle of the night. That's another thing. My energy levels from the protocols and training, it makes me very, very productive.
You have the
Very
ability to. And so what would be
yeah.
your recommended physical routine for someone that, did optimize it, they're in the right spot, they have the right mindset, their levels are good and they want to get on it. Now they want to get on a good workout routine going. What would be your recommendation? How many days a week are you there? How are you splitting these workouts up? What's a baseline intro that you could give to people?
To start with, people should start with 2 to 3 times a week and emphasize strength training as opposed to cardio. We have the fallacy that cardio is the way to burn calories. It's not. It's a conjunction because that's one aspect. Cardiovascular fitness is very important for our health and improving metabolism and so forth. But the main thing is weight training. And
Mhm.
I don't mean these fancy exercises, sticking to your basics. For a beginner, I would start with 2 times a week, full body workouts, use the machines, get the form. The weight training is very, very intimidating. If you
Mhm.
can get introduced to a trainer that can guide you, at least to start. Look at YouTube videos, look for workouts, and then we use what we call gradual progression. Once you start with the full body workouts, go to 2 to 3 days a week. You have separated by 48 hours to allow proper rest. Make sure you're eating carbohydrates before the workout, after
Mm.
replenish the glycogen stores, increase your protein intake. And fat is not bad. You have to remember that. We did the blood work for some natural competitors. Their their fats were so low. Now
Mhm.
remember, cholesterol gets a bad rap. We require it. And they were
Mm.
unable to make hormones because they didn't have barely any cholesterol in their diet.
Wow.
That's another thing. That right now we've lowered the cholesterol layers. They realize that 21 million Americans should not be on statins. Right away, they put them
Wow.
on statins. Yeah,
Yeah, I've been
and
hearing stuff like that circulating about how cholesterol is really not, this horrible thing that we've all thought it was.
within limits. I mean,
Right.
listen, hormones are steroid ring structures. Your cell membrane consists of cholesterol to help stabilize it. The
Mhm.
myelin sheath, which covers the axon of the nerves, your nerve cells, require this fatty sheath.
Mm.
So we need a certain amount in our diet. We
Right.
shouldn't, and then they've lowered the value now and they're ready to medicate with statins right away. That's another thing, makes you raise an eyebrow. Again, not a conspiracy theorist, but as a logical, critical thinker, you don't even have to be experienced in the medical field. You have to raise an eyebrow
Mhm.
about what's going on here.
What do you think about fasting? That became this, I feel like, a little bit of a fad recently where people are, they're waking up, they're not eating. I mean, a lot of us work out usually in the morning, but we're
Yeah.
fasting till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I've heard mixed thoughts on that. What would you advise our listeners?
There are some benefits, but they are still questionable.
Mhm.
You have to remember, all these fad diets, whether it's low carb, fasting, whether you're limiting your food choices, whether you're limiting the time that you're feeding, all it does is create a calorie deficit. That's what it
Mhm.
comes down to. The benefits that you see as far as the fasting goes, that they talk about autophagy and all these things, certain supplements can do that as well. I know that I can't work out unless I have a certain amount of carbohydrates in my body. So for the person who's trying to work out and then fast, it's not conducive.
Mhm.
I don't know about you, but I like to eat.
Right.
So, but again, I always say if it works for that person, then that's your diet for you. That's another thing. Cookie cutter diets and everything don't work. But it
Right.
all comes down to creating a calorie deficit. I wrote a book and it was called, the integrated blueprint to weight loss.
Oh wow.
It's the muscle centric approach, as opposed to basically cutting your calories, increasing energy expenditure, focus on building muscle, which is metabolically active, that burns calories even at rest. working out, which accelerates metabolism also for up to 72 hours. Another reason why weight training is superior to cardio for weight loss. But we should be doing all three components, basically. There's strength training, there's cardiovascular, and then there's flexibility. Another one that's often neglected too. That helps for preventing injury and so forth,
Mhm.
and a very important part for even carrying out our daily activities of daily living. Flexibility is important too, as well.
Yeah, that's no, it's the truth. It's all these things are so important just to I always say it's not just for your body, but it's for your mind too. And really when you get out of a good workout or you get off a long
Oh,
walk, you know,
100%.
you're a different person than when you first started. So it's a great way to turn your day around. Now, when John, when someone wants to get started with you, how does it work? We might have listeners today saying like, "Wow, this sounds amazing. How do I get started?" What does that process look like with you?
So basically, they submit their information with us. My team will follow up. And then a lot of people now I see, they know what they want. They know that it's like, listen, I have low testosterone. A lot of people are experimenting on their own, so they're coming to us, they've done their own research, and they're familiar with some of the peptides and the weight loss medications. And then usually I myself try and do a lot of the strategy calls and consults.
Okay.
And then from that, because some people just need more education, I'm very hands-on with things. My staff is to a degree, but obviously I have a lot of experience. Not only you have to remember, not only the academic background, but I've been training and doing these things for decades. And I
Right.
always say that about, the doctors. In order to be called an expert, you got to get behind the proverbial wheel of the car,
Mhm.
right? So you could read a book on how to drive a car, but until you got behind the wheel, how could you really speak about it?
Right.
So you're going to listen to an overweight doctor that smells of cigarettes. You can tell you need to lose weight.
Mhm.
I've been doing this stuff for decades.
Mhm.
So combine the academic knowledge with the practical use. And I'll actually show, like, I'm starting a protocol. I went
Mhm.
on the body fat scale and I showed as my body fat decreased while I was on the protocol and increased my lean muscle mass, which is called recomposition, which at 56 years old as an advanced lifter is very, very difficult. But that
Right.
shows that, things. So it's anecdotal evidence, but I'm showing people that this works.
It's
So if you
possible.
have these people that don't, they have just let's say the book smart or the basic, the knowledge from the book. There's a lot of things that the book doesn't tell you about, the
Mhm.
little nuances. And that's why a lot of providers, they're trying to jump on the bandwagon, but they just don't know what they're doing. They don't live the lifestyle. You
So
got to
you're
live the life you preach. That's my motto.
I
Live
love
the
that.
life you preach.
And so
Yeah.
now integrated wellness is where are you located? Are you in Monmouth County, New Jersey or
So we actually we use a telemedicine model, and I have providers in multiple states.
Okay.
So we do have a small med clinic in one of the pharmacies that I work with,
Mhm.
because they wanted some little bit of a primary care there. It's my friend's pharmacy,
Okay.
so we set that up. But now we use telemedicine. So we have patients from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Florida, and an expanding network itself. I'm doing it very slowly to make sure that patient care does not suffer. The providers, we have our license in multiple states where an NP or a PA can't operate under our authority. We have collaborating physicians to oversee, review their records. I have, also overseeing physicians as well. I just took on a Dr. Uccello from the city who's been practicing for 30 years in longevity. She'll be working with us
Wow.
too. So, yeah, the telemedicine model now with the at-home test kits,
Yeah.
really makes it more accessible to everybody.
That's great. So then, people can be anywhere and integrate in a wellness plan with you. I love
Yes.
that. And now you got to tell us though, because I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, like, how did you become one of the original UFC fighters?
We were doing the landscape of martial arts was very, very different back then. You'd have people come in from other schools, they would say they're white belts, and it would turn into a fight. And, it
Yeah.
was really literally like the Wild Wild West back then. So I did a lot of underground fights, had people come in, you'd go to other people's dojos, and it was really, really interesting. So I saw this on TV, and I'm all about challenges.
Hmm.
So I did some fights that they viewed, and they invited me to the Ultimate UFC. And at that time, I was actually invited to the Ultimate, but I had an injury in training. That would have been the Grand Championships, and
Oh,
then
wow.
they banned it here. So then they went to overseas, and they asked me to fight in Japan and Brazil, which was very, very, it was just amazing. They treat you like literally a movie star, the fighters there. But I was finishing my master's, and I felt it was best that I continue with that. And I did a signing with Mark Coleman, Ken
Mm.
Shamrock, Dan Severn several years ago, and it was really sad to see Mark Kerr. I took the right path. Mark
Mm.
needed a GoFundMe to pay for his medical bills. Here
Oh,
was these guys that were world champions with gold around and they were just left to the wayside to fend for themselves. And I find that disgusting.
yeah.
You know,
Oh,
yeah, they were not compensated properly or taken care of afterwards. So I
it's
made the right decision. But yeah,
and so you took
so
it. You took the path of education, like we said before. You lecture at
yeah.
universities, and tell us about. I didn't hit on your educational background. You have a master's. Tell us a little bit about that.
Basically, I have a master's in biology education. I expanded now. I teach anatomy, physiology, microbiology, pharmacology, nutrition. Despite what I look like, I'm really am the closet geek. I even collect comic books. So, I've been wanting to go to the Comic-Con for years. And when I used to walk into the comic book store, they used to look at me funny, like, "What are you doing here?" And then, yeah, so and then my what I credit is this my background in the physiology and in discussing with my doctor friends, and then my practical application has given me insight well beyond even most of those in the medical field. So I like to
Right.
consider myself like a surgical sales representative that's in the operating room with the doctor. I mean, I don't have my MD, and I make this very clear, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm educating even our staff and onboarding them on all these new protocols, the doctors, the PAs, the NPs. So I provide the education and consulting, and then they, of course, are the practitioners that make the final say. They write the scripts, and they have the overall, they do all the medical evaluations themselves. So I'm in an advisory educational position from there. And,
That's
and
amazing.
this is my
It's
life.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is,
Yeah.
and it's what you preach and you practice. And I love that saying that you have that you're leading by example, right? Director of Integrated Wellness. People can find you at Professor. I think there's two underscores John Camp on Instagram.
Right.
Where else can they find you?
Oh, well, we have our iwnyc.com, and then we have our business, the business site, integrated.wellness.new York. But there's an intermingling because my personal, because that is my life, you
Hmm.
know, and I always tell people, I'm not selling you anything. I'm just sharing my lifestyle.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I could retire right now. I've been with the Board of Education for 31 years. I could retire, but this is my passion. So if I retire, it's to do this further.
Hmm.
And this is something that, this is, like I said, it's my life, something I love. I'm passionate about it. Everybody's like, well, you're making money. That's coming. And I don't really not concerned. It's not my focus,
Hmm.
and I have a career. I'm very comfortable.
Right.
This is something I'm passionate about. I want to change the face of medicine. I think that we've gone the wrong path. I want to make an impact. I want to leave a legacy. And I think
Mm.
this is my way to do so.
Well, I commend you for that. I think the authenticity and the passion behind what you're doing is felt, it's seen. I'm sure our listeners are feeling it, whether they're listening on Apple Podcast or YouTube. All of your information is going to be in our description. So, I urge you guys to go reach out to John, make sure that you follow him. He posts a ton of educational information on a consistent basis, debunking the myths and letting you know what's out there for you. And so, John, I urge our listeners to go check you out. I'm so excited
Thank
that
you,
you
Nicole.
joined us here
It's been a
today.
pleasure.
And
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Been a pleasure.
awesome.
Mm.
Thank you for joining us. And guys, go ahead, like I said before, follow John. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you again soon.